Pieper. He's the head of the Institute for Research on Operative Medicine at the University of Witten, Cologne, Germany. Dr. Pieper has a Ph.D. in epidemiology and has published over the last 7 years more than 80 works in scientific journals, but protocols and studies about evidence synthesis, mainly as overviews or reviews, scoping reviews, and mainly systematic reviews and meta-analysis. On aspects related to health interventions and evaluation of health technologies, and several areas of knowledge like neurosurgery, pediatric, nephrology, oncology, etc. But probably his work that has influenced us as a group has been his research line about research on research or meta-epidemiological studies about performance of appraisal tools to assess methodological quality, risk of bias, and questioning the integrity and the usefulness of reviews protocols as compared with clinical trial protocols. So, vielen Dank, dass Sie nach Córdoba gekommen sind. Wie Sie dann war, dass Sie Iviksen an ich erfahrenen Mitten Foxen des IMIBIC Tag Canen. Gracias por venir a Córdoba. Estamos muy agradecidos de que puedas compartir tus conocimientos y experiencia con los investigadores del IMIBIC que están aquí reunidos. Y a continuación, pues, va a hablarnos sobre la importancia de las revisiones sistemáticas, por qué están surgiendo tantas de tan diferente calidad y qué problemas y qué ventajas tiene esto. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Juan, for the invitation. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. Nevertheless, I need to correct you in one point. I'm not the head of the Institute for Research in Operative Medicine. I'm only the head of a research group dealing with evidence-based health services research at the Institute for Research on Operative Medicine. My university, you probably won't be aware of Witten and Horario. Those are two smaller towns in the western part of Germany, but our university has a decentralized structure with hospitals in the western part of Germany, and so this is the reason why I am not located in Witten but in Cologne. And yeah, I'm very glad about that, as Witten is not a very nice city. But okay, yeah, I would also like to apologize that I have brought the bad weather from Germany with me here today to Córdoba, and I'm going back tomorrow. And I promise you that I will try my best to take the rain with me again. Now the topic of our talk today, of the next 30 or 40 minutes, I hope we will still have some time for discussion, is the topic of multiple and overlapping systematic reviews. I came to deal with the topic when starting my Ph.D. thesis, as it was a new type of evidence in thesis called overviews of systematic reviews. So this means it was the idea of how to combine already published systematic reviews in a new type of evidence synthesis. This is also a very interesting topic, and it comes along with a lot of challenges where we have no real and clear solutions for that. But this is not something I would like to get deep into that today. Today I would like to focus on the question that we know there are a lot of systematic reviews published. I will show you some numbers in a few minutes, and the question for us as clinicians or methodologists, is there any way to make use of already published systematic reviews, as we know that there are a lot of them out, and probably even too much. Okay, first I would like to declare my conflict of interest. As Juan already mentioned, I'm an author of numerous systematic reviews, and I'm also an associate editor with BMC Systematic Reviews and BMC Medical Research Methodology. So the agenda for the next half an hour, just some figures on epidemiology. What is the problem we are really going to talk about? Then I would like to take you on a journey and putting you in the place of being a systematic reviewer who has to make a decision whether to conduct a systematic review or not. Following, then I will focus on how we can make real use of already published systematic reviews, if there are any, and I will conclude with what Winston Churchill would probably say to our problem. So I have only one slide on epidemiology of systematic reviews, and this might be very known to you. What we see here is a really dramatic exponential increase in systematic reviews and meta-analysis over the past, in particular over the past 10 years, and the number is still increasing. And while we probably would all say that systematic reviews can be very useful, we probably would also say that the huge number of systematic reviews might already be simply too much. On the right hand of side, we can see two interesting figures where we can see where a lot of systematic reviews are from. Unfortunately, I'm missing Spain here, but what is very interesting about that is the number of systematic reviews and meta-analysis published from Chinese groups over the last couple of years, and the number is probably still increasing. So there are a lot of systematic reviews and meta-analysis that are going to be published, and this has won some concern. In 2016, John Ioannidis has published something I would call a landmark paper dealing with the topic of systematic reviews and with all the problems that comes along with them, the mass production of redundant, misleading, and conflicted systematic reviews and meta-analysis. This is really something that is worth to read. So what did he say? He said there's a massive production of unnecessary, misleading, and conflicted systematic reviews. Conflicted does mean that when there are several systematic reviews on a given topic, they do not always come to the same conclusion. So there might be some conflicts. Instead of promoting evidence-based medicine and healthcare, these instruments often serve mostly as easily produced, publishable units or marketing tools. This is definitely problems, and there are a lot of suboptimal systematic reviews and meta-analysis due to suboptimal methods, and of course this can be harmful. Needless to say. The last point is also very interesting, as he's mentioning that the publication of systematic reviews should be realigned to remove bias and vested interest, blah, 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 with the primary production of evidence. So I think this is something that is really very important, and I don't know how the structure is here in Spain. I can, from the German setting, I can tell you that there is no real connection between people who are going to conduct systematic reviews on the one hand, and people who are going to do primary research, conducting clinical trials. And I think this is a problem. This is a problem in a lot of countries. This should be improved in future. If you go to the UK, for example, there are clinical trial research units who are going to conduct clinical trials, but these are the same people who are also going to conduct systematic reviews. Okay, so one of the points he mentions is redundancy. So redundancy, what is redundancy? Redundancy is supposed to be a number of systematic reviews who have the same question. They're going to answer the same question, and it might be simply unnecessary to have a number of systematic reviews on the same topic. But nevertheless, my question to that is, who is able to define a concrete number when redundancy really begins? Keep that just in mind for the next couple of minutes. I will come back to that later on. And we all know that reviews could be so useful, but there were a lot of problems with them. There would have been a lot of examples of such as that one, but I've chosen that one. 16 includes systematic reviews were partially discrepant in statistical significances of reported outcome parameters. 12 systematic reviews did not include available relevant trials. Okay, this is something that can happen if your search strategy is not well designed, or if you don't have access to all relevant databases. While there were also 8 systematic reviews that included trials that should not have been included according to the systematic review's aim. So we see there's really a lot of problem, and what is even a larger problem, and it is not written down here, is that this is also one example where the number of systematic reviews on this topic, there were more systematic reviews on the topic than there are included randomized controlled trials. Yeah, so the former idea of systematic reviews to summarize the evidence from randomized controlled trials, it does not seem to work here and in many other examples. In the case of conflicting reviews, when you have some systematic reviews on the same topic and they came to conflicting results, we should always try to aim to resolve the discordancy. Why are they really different? Why do they come to different conclusions? And there is a really old publication from 1997 by Alejandro Haddad on this topic, who has provided some sort of an algorithm to deal with that topic. It's really interesting, but unfortunately it did never come really into practice. But if you end up with having a number of systematic reviews, I would like to advise you to look into the paper and look for this algorithm, as it might help you to to see why systematic reviews could be really different. And you see there are really a lot of reasons. So it starts here at the top. Is it really the same question? I would come back to that in a few minutes. Do they include the same trials? What about quality assessment of the trials? What about selection criteria and so on? There's really a lot of things that can explain discordancy in systematic reviews. Okay, we were talking about redundancy, but what about replication? We know the psychology replication crisis that has come up mostly at the end of the last year. 2 years earlier, there was the replication crisis in biomedical sciences. And we should not forget that replication is, in general terms, something that we need in science. It's very important to replicate findings. And if we combine the idea of replication, that replication is helpful or might be helpful, or we could also even say that it is necessary. We could come back to this. I don't know whether you can see it from the from being in the back. So what you see here a number of, I think, eight airplanes, and they all look the same. And imagine these were not airplanes, but these would be systematic reviews. So the question now could be, what are they? Is this an example of systematic reviews being redundant, or could this also be an example of systematic reviews being replicated? I would say that it's not a problem if there are some systematic reviews on the same topic, and they replicate the findings of some earlier systematic reviews. But nevertheless, of course, there's definitely a point where we say that that it starts to be redundant, but it's not easy to figure out where this cutoff point should really be. I don't. So this is more some sort of question I have to you than I'm able to answer here. Okay, now let's move on, and I promise you to take you on a short journey. Imagine you are a systematic reviewer and you would like to try to decide whether you are going to start or to conduct a new systematic review. And this could look like this. So this is the question: should we start a new systematic reviews? And there are mainly two ways you could think of that. So the first one is probably what is most likely. Our systematic reviews are already published on that topic, with what might lead to the question, okay, are they useful for you or are they not useful for you? What is probably not that likely is the case that there are no other systematic reviews published on the topic you are interested in, and then you could ask whether there are other systematic reviews ongoing but probably not published yet. And I would like to go more into deep with that. So in the case that there are no other systematic reviews published on your topic, you should ask whether there are other people working on it. And there are not a lot of ways to find that out. So the first one is you could look whether there are some published protocols of systematic reviews. This is something I will talk more on in the afternoon. And the other possibility is to look into Prospero. Prospero is an international register of systematic reviews. It is it doesn't come along with any costs. If you are aware of clinicaltrials.gov, where you are able to register your clinical trials, it is very similar to that. So you are simply able to register your systematic review there at the point of beginning. And one of the hopes is that people will look into Prospero and see whether there are some other ongoing reviews on a given topic, and then this would probably minimize the problem of redundant systematic reviews. And just to show you a small figure, Prospero was established in 2011, so already 8 years ago. But also here the number is really increasing. And many people started already going to just systematic reviews and Prospero. And based on our research on Prospero and systematic reviews, we would say that there's probably 1/3 of all published systematic reviews have been registered in Prospero, and the number is probably increasing. Okay, so now you have the information whether there are other systematic reviews ongoing, and so you end up with two possibilities. So if there's no systematic reviews, that's good news for you. You can start with your systematic review. If there are other systematic reviews already ongoing on a topic, what to do with that? Yeah, you could try to get in contact with the people working on that systematic review, But from a practical point of view, the question is, what should be really, what are you really aiming towards? The problem is, I don't know how the situation is in Spain, but in Germany we mainly need a lot of third-party funded money for projects. So it is some months ago that I had a situation that I was asked whether my group would be able to conduct a systematic review on a given topic, and it should turn out that it was really well paid. But I had a look into Prospero, and I saw that there's already a systematic review ongoing on this topic, and this was really a difficult situation from an ethical point of view. As well, you see, you have your staff in your team, and you need to get more fundings in order to be able to finance your staff. So from that point, I would be willing to say, okay, yes, let's go for the review. While on the other side, from an ethical point of view, from a scientific ethical point of view, I would say, okay, there's already a systematic review ongoing on that, and I also knew the group who's going to work on that, and I would assume that the result would be a high quality systematic review. So what to do? So it's probably not very easy to deal with that in a scientific environment. Another example I had also some months ago. I was asked whether our group would be willing to participate in a clinical practice guideline, and the task was rather easy. It was there was already a European clinical guideline on that. And the idea was to produce a national guideline on the same topic, and they wanted us to update 3 systematic reviews that have formerly been already published. I said, okay, that sounds really interesting, as the topic of how to update already published systematic reviews is also a very interesting one. But we were not able to start this project because of practical problems in terms of authorships. So when you're going to start to update a systematic review that has been published by another group, you need to get in contact with them, and they would need to share all the data with us, and it was very difficult. It took us a long time to discuss all the issues about publication rights and authorships, and finally we did not manage that. So there might be, so in theory, I would say that in theory it sounds good to get in contact with people working on systematic reviews, but there might be some practical issues with that. Okay, so let's turn to the more likely situation that there are already other systematic reviews published on a given topic, and the question is, are they useful or are they not useful for your situation? And one of the most important question when you are going to read a systematic review is definitely whether it is current. So current in terms of, is it really up to date? There was a very nice publication on that. From that we know that 50% of systematic reviews are already out of date after 5.5 years. So this is really fast. The next point is the quality, and you can subdivide quality into 2 subcategories. It's reporting quality, is it really well reported? This is very important in order to be able to judge the methodological quality of the systematic review. And there are some tools, AMSTER2 and ROBIS, to investigate the methodological quality or the risk of bias of systematic reviews that you could use in order to assess the quality, whether it is a good review or not. But what is also interesting is whether, if you are going to you have the aim of, or you have an idea to conduct a systematic review, and then you will find some other systematic reviews on the same topic, and it really comes down to the question: is it really the same topic? So is it the same objective, or is it in terms of producing a systematic review where we often use the PICO scheme defined by population, intervention, comparison, and outcome, or is it really the same PICO? There might be simple differences and some definitions of some of the PICO components here. And even if there are reviews who really share the same PICO, it might still be that they have different inclusions criteria. So in terms of speaking about redundant systematic reviews, I'm often not completely convinced that the reviews are really about the same topic. It was 3 or 4 years ago we tried to start a short project on them. On that, we took we had a sample of overviews, including a lot of systematic reviews on the same topics, and we tried to work with the Dawid algorithm I've shown you some minutes ago, as you remember, the first question of the Dawid algorithm is it really the same question? And we ended up with that many systematic reviews really, they did not share the same question, but the question was very similar, but it was not really the same. Okay, so let's imagine there are potentially useful systematic reviews. So what to do with them? How can they be helpful for us in designing a new systematic review? And there might be different levels or categories on how this could work. So if you end up with having, say, 3 or 4 systematic reviews that are up to date, that are well reported, that have a high methodological quality, okay, then you might end up with saying, okay, let's just look what they conclude. If there's no conflicting, if there are no conflicting systematic reviews, so they all share the same conclusion, it's probably not necessary to start with another systematic review. There are also some more, more important parts when conducting a systematic review. This is the risk of bias assessment. So most of you will know, when you are going to conduct a systematic review, it's very important to deal with the quality, with the methodological quality or the risk of bias of the included studies. And it's also a lot about extracting data from the included studies. And the idea of many people is that the risk of bias assessment, or the assessments from methodological quality and extracted data, can be just taken from other already published systematic reviews and simply taken from there and included into your systematic reviews. Yeah, so there were already for many years there were the idea that we could just sort them in a database and then look into the database when you are going to conduct your own systematic review, and if you find the relevant randomized controlled trial that is included in the database, and you have also included that in your systematic review, you can just take the extracted data and the risk of bias assessment, and this will probably expedite the whole process of the systematic review. And I'm not really convinced that this does really work, and I will try to illustrate that on a short example. This is so I'll start with the risk of bias assessment, and this is the example of a study of Jorn et al. Published in the Journal of Clinical Epidemiology in 2007. They looked for Cochrane reviews, for subfertility Cochrane reviews dealing with the topic of subfertility, and they simply looked into the systematic reviews and looked for included studies wherever they overlap. So there are definitely some studies, some randomized controlled trials that have been included in the systematic reviews that are not included only in one systematic review, but that are included in 2 or even more systematic reviews. And they have simply compared their the risk of bias assessment across systematic reviews. So the risk of bias, so you are always going to assess the same randomized controlled trial, and what you see here is the agreement based on different domains. So you know, for example, that blinding is very important in randomized controlled trials if achievable. So you might think of that this is a pretty easy domain to assess, but the agreement here is only 35%. So this does mean that there's really a lot of difference in that. Yeah, the question for me is what agreement would we accept? Is it 71%? Is that a good result for agreement in that case? I don't know. And easy things can be difficult. What you see here is the assessment from the Cochrane handbook of the risk of bias tool on how to assess allocation, concealment to avoid selection bias due to inadequate concealment of allocations prior to assignment. And it seems to be pretty easy. So the rationale is participants and investigators enrolling participants could not foresee assignment because one of the following or an equivalent method was used to conceal allocation. And I would also like to draw your attention to the last example. So one good way in doing this would be to have sequentially numbered, opaque, and sealed envelopes. And this sounds very, very easy, but having read a lot of clinical studies, you will very often have the information that the envelopes are sequentially numbered and they have been sealed. What is very often missing is the information on whether the envelopes were opaque or not. And so there are now 3 groups of people in this situation, and you can simply come to 3 different conclusions. So there's the first group of people who will say, okay, I think this is sufficient. This is a low risk of bias. So they have mentioned in the paper that the envelopes were sealed, and they have mentioned that they were sequentially numbered. Okay, they do not mention whether they were opaque or not, but they will probably not write it down in the paper if they were not opaque. So let's assume they were opaque. So we say it's a low risk of bias. There's a second group who would say, okay, we don't have any information on that, whether the envelopes were opaque or not. So I do not have all the necessary information, so I will end up with an unclear risk of bias. And there's also the last group, the third one, who will say, okay, they don't say that the envelope is opaque, so we have to assume that it was not opaque, and they will probably end up with a high risk of bias. And in the end, I think there's a point for all of the three categories and risk of bias assessments here. So I don't think that this result is a problem unless you are going to assess the risk of bias in the same way while doing your systematic review. While it seems to be clear that it might be very different if you are going to compare risk of bias assessments across different systematic reviews. We have tried to replicate the study some months ago on a sample of Cochrane reviews from dealing with tobacco, and the result was very similar to that one. So I don't think there's something wrong with subfertility reviews. I think this is more a general finding that we will face very often. Data extraction and systematic reviews can be a very long procedure, and we were interested last year, no, it's not last year, it's already 2 years ago, in the frequency of data extraction errors in systematic reviews and methods how to increase data quality in data extraction and methodological reviews. And yeah, we were a bit surprised that we were only able to find six studies that really deal with that topic, while having a look at the results of the 6 included studies, they were really interesting. This is one example of one of the included studies. There were 10 people, and they had the task to replicate meta-analysis. They were given completely the same information, so they had all the same trial reports, and the methods for the meta-analysis they were defined a priori. Probably the only reason that can play a role here is really the data extraction or errors in data extraction here. And what you see here now, so only 10% of the replicated meta-analysis had exactly the same result as the original meta-analysis, while there were really a lot of possible differences across another meta-analysis. So this is certainly a point that data extraction might not be as easy as many might think. Literature search is another interesting topic. You could have the idea of simply taking the literature search from one systematic review and perform the same search strategy. Here again, I think in theory this could work really well, but the problem is that the reporting of literature search strategies is often very bad. They are mostly not fully replicable, and it's also very difficult to assess literature search strategies just being able to read them in a paper. But nevertheless, what might be really interesting if you have a pool of identified studies that you are where you already know that these studies will also be included in your systematic reviews. This can be very useful also in designing a new search strategy. Okay, so I come to a interim conclusion. So I don't think that it does really work to take the risk of bias assessment from other reviews and incorporate this into your systematic reviews. I'm also not very convinced about just taking the included studies from our systematic reviews, and there are also problems with the literature search strategies. I was also not very convinced about taking the extracted data. Over here, I think it really depends on what data are you going to take from our systematic reviews. I think this is some sort of a very similar question when you think of conducting a systematic review, and you know that the gold standard for performing a systematic review is to perform the data extraction by 2 people independently. My personal opinion on that is that it's not useful to do that for all data to extract. It's only important to do this for some for the very important data. So if you are interested in the effects of an intervention, of a new therapy, you should be very, very, very cautious about extracting the outcomes of the included studies. While I think many other details, where does the study took place, when does it took place, what were the characteristics of the included study populations, this might be something that could really be taken from our systematic reviews. Okay, so in all, this is bad news. There's no time for other ways, and I think we have to accept that that producing systematic reviews might be a very time-consuming process. Okay, that's not me here. My desk looks very similar to that, but that's not me. Okay. Nevertheless, in the end, if you would ask me which systematic reviews can we trust, I think we need to find an answer to that, or what might be difficult. And I'm a member of the GREAT working group. You probably know GREAT is a system developed by the GREAT working group in order to facilitate the assessment of the quality of evidence and systematic reviews. I'm part of a working group who tries to come up with a guidance for overviews of systematic reviews in the context of GREAT. There's currently no guidance on it. There were some people who try to do it, but in fact nobody does really know what's going on there. And I was taking part in an interview in this context, and what you see here is the result of a normal pairwise meta-analysis with a lot of studies included. You have the information on the risk of bias assessment of the included studies. In addition, you have also the information that this was when weighted with EMSTER. EMSTER is a checklist for assessing the methodological quality of systematic reviews. It fulfills 10 out of 11 possible points. So there's it might be a good review, and there's also some information on another tool on ROBIS. But we do not need to get into the details of the results of this meta-analysis. What is important here was that the task was, considering the information below, talk us through your approach to assessing the certainty of evidence. And so the question here is this, do I think whether this is a reliable systematic review or not? And it was really a tough decision or a tough task to come up here with a good answer to that. And so having produced a number of systematic reviews and overviews, I said, okay, yeah, okay, it looks good when looking on the Amstar score, but yeah, in the end, I don't know. There could also be another review scoring only 8 out of 11 points, and it could still be better than the other one. And so they asked me, okay, David, so what is really the point where you would say this is a systematic review you would really trust in? And the answer is not very evidence-based, but my answer was that I would probably trust most in a systematic review where I know by whom it was conducted. So if I know that it was conducted by a well-performing group that I know, and I know that they are able to conduct high-quality systematic reviews, I would be probably most happy with that, and I would trust most in such a review. And it really turned out at the end that this was not only a single opinion, but there were also some other people who shared the same opinion. Okay, so I'm coming to my conclusion. So in general, I think making use of published systematic reviews is really challenging. It might sound easy at the first sight, but I think there are a lot of practical problems that need to be resolved. Yeah, one problem in that is that there's really not many research focusing on that. In order to reduce the number of systematic reviews, in particular to reduce the number of redundant systematic reviews, what we definitely need is some sort of, I call it stop criteria. So there should be a point where we are able to say, okay, this clinical question has already been answered, and we do not need more systematic reviews on that. This is true for systematic reviews, but we also have the same problem for clinical trials as well, and that might be even be more important for clinical studies than it is for systematic reviews. And it's also about ethics and about including people into clinical studies, while you are not going to include any people into systematic reviews. And the whole topic, or the whole problem I've tried to present, is has not only a relevance when you try to start a new, or you start to thinking about starting a new systematic review, but it's also very relevant when you think of updates of already published systematic reviews. So this does mean you do not want to start to develop then de novo, but you will just try to update an already published systematic review. Okay, or we could just stick with Winston Churchill. I have to admit that I have presented the same slide to another audience 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they said to me that there was one person in the room who said that this is not true. So this is a quote that well, when you look it up today, it is said that it was said by Winston Churchill during the Second World War. In fact, it's probably not true, but nevertheless, I only believe in statistics that I doctored myself, and if we try to put that into our context, we could also say I only believe in systematic reviews that I doctored myself. Yeah, so this is probably, I know that I did not have any really good practical solutions for you when starting with a systematic review, but at least I hope that I was able to draw your attention to some points you might give some thoughts when thinking about starting a new systematic review. Thank you.
clear for you? No.
No, I think there were a lot of questions arising from that.
Well, which one do you think is the more important issue that moves people to develop thousands of systematic research worldwide? The more important power that moves them.
That moved them to
Yeah.
produce systematic reviews?
Yeah.
I think
Pharma industry, academic interest, funding interest. Because even bad systematic review implies a lot of people working, a lot of time. So it's a waste of time to develop a bad quality systematic review.
Yeah.
What do you think that is the reason of the boost of systematic review worldwide in the past 5 years?
Okay, so one reason for that is definitely increase in systematic reviews published from China. In more general terms, I think that it's probably nowadays simply how to put it in nice words. It's very easy to produce a systematic review. Yeah, it's very complicated to conduct a clinical trial, as you have to deal with a lot of things. You have to include your patients and so on, and it takes a lot of time. And at the same time, you are able to produce a systematic review and get it published, whether good or bad.
Maybe it's more cited, and so the journal is more interested in review than in primary studies, or no clinical study, but any other kind of observational study. So it's like a circle where everybody is interested in boosting, producing systematic review, but nobody cares about the quality or the significance of the use.
Yeah. So okay, so one point is definitely that we have too much systematic reviews that are going to be published, but so just thinking in terms of replications, this is not a problem alone. So the major problem really arises from the point that most of systematic reviews are simply bad, as they do not follow they are not of a high quality methodology. But yeah, I think it's really difficult to deal with that. I think there's also a huge problem with meta-analysis as part of systematic reviews. I think that we have too much meta-analysis. People are simply going to combine everything in their systematic review just because it's very easy. Yeah. So for example, in a Cochrane collaboration, you have the review manager. So nearly everybody is able to perform a literature search, whether good or bad, then to include some studies and extract the data of it, then just put it into the review manager. Then you are going to press the button and voila, there's your meta-analysis. And yeah, and this is problematic. But the problem about that is, I think that many people think that meta-analysis, that a systematic review should contain a meta-analysis, as it does make it better. But this is simply not true.
And the last question: what is the importance of this amount of systematic review in the internet or in the database, and they're used by the conductor of practical guidelines. Because you are closer to decision making in the clinical. So a lot of systematic reviews that are difficult to classify or to select, and the content most of the time very influenced by conflict of interest from pharma. So at the end, it's like there's slight interest in creating disarray about this synthesis document.
Yeah.
To finally confuse to the final consumer of the evidence. So it's like, for me, it's like taking this project underneath.
Yeah.
With, this is only the beginning, following the clinical guidelines. Which document will we all use for a political decision in a health system, or which, at the end there are some people that have to make decisions that are not very skilled in assessing the quality of or discriminating or what you have presented.
Okay, so I think, well, when it comes down to clinical practice guidelines, or to have decisions at the national health system level about the coverage, I think this is we definitely need methodological experts and evidence and pieces that were able to assess the quality of the systematic reviews and of the included trials. This is also very important in clinical practice guidelines. There are numerous systematic reviews, numerous randomized clinical trials. So for the application in the clinic, the idea of a clinical practice guideline is, in theory, it's good. Okay, there are all the problems with the conflicts of interest, with money from pharmaceutical companies. Yeah, this is a different story. But we need to. I think we definitely need to make the clinical practice guidelines more accessible. Try to put the content of the clinical practice guidelines and with some digital solutions, say to the smartphone app or something like that. But I think this needs more work on that. So we are very far behind that in Germany. Yeah? We are still producing clinical practice guidelines with 300 or 400 pages that can be downloaded on a website, and there are only a few who start to develop their mobile health app applications.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.